Guy in the hat, Mary Frances Chan Johnson Pop Driscoll from Midland, Texas, and her son Ted Pop from Abilene, and my sister's supposed to be here. She drove up from Houston today. I haven't seen her. There you are, Patty. We got a spot for you right here, Patty Lambert. If you'd come join us up here at the front, please. And I'd also like to introduce our spouses and children. My wife, Ann, over here is dressed appropriately in all black today. We came prepared, as you can see. And my son, Spivey, who's in a black hat, back over here, and my daughter, Robbie Jane. And Ted's family, his wife, Nancy, over here, and their daughters, Mary Catherine and Jessica, and Patty's husband, Bill, right back here in the back. And Patty's two daughters couldn't be here today to join us. And I think that's everybody, isn't it? You tell me, Mom. You had us all. All right, full house. At this time, I'd like to have my brother take over, and he's going to introduce some special guests and some of our honorees.
I'd like to also add my personal welcome to everybody. I know in the last 2 or 3 weeks I've talked to a lot of y'all, and I appreciate each and every one being here. I know a lot of you have traveled a long way, and it's a hot day, and we'll get our marker taken care of here. It's a very special day. We're going to dedicate a historical marker and rededicate a historical monument, but we have two very special people here with us today. Bud Matthews had quite a family, and 2 of his children are here today. About a month ago, a friend of mine named Martin Pothier came out here and took a photograph. It's a photograph of the Bud Matthews switch. It was taken right about sundown. There's a little crescent moon in the background. And we think it's a pretty special memento. And at this time, I would like to honor our 2 guests, Mr. Watt Matthews and Mrs. Lucille Matthews Brittingham, with this as a memento for this occasion. Let me introduce some other guests as well. We got a little more family here as well. One of the inspirational people for me has been our cousin Louis Bob Davis. He said, "Hey, don't be so cheap. Don't just put a little railroad car out here. Build a whole train, the whole track. Build it all the way to Albany so people can ride on the train." Well, I'm afraid we haven't quite been able to do that. Louis Bob and Joanne Davis here? Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Welcome. Their 2 daughters couldn't be here today, but Lou Ann and Jerry Slavin, Lois and Russell Haynes and their pride and joy Preston. We also had some family. Jack and Ruby Yates were here. I saw them. There we are. There we go. Holly Yates and her fiance Greg Jackowitz. Friends here. Welcome. Britt, their other daughter, and David Jones cannot be here. They're on a trip to Mexico. It sounds like fun. Betty Lou Gittens from Fort Worth.
Right here.
Great. We're glad you're here. Thank you very much. We have some political folks as well, some public officials. Congressman Charles Stenholm. He had a pretty good excuse. He's down at Texas A&M learning something. So I figured if you're not here, being at Texas A&M is about the next best place. Senator Bill Sims, Bob and Shirley Hunter, Mayor Gary McCaleb of Abilene all responded and wished they could be here and send their best wishes and congratulations on the event. Representative John and Suzanne Cook from Breckenridge, were they able to make it? Great. John, glad you're here. We appreciate it. I know you've had a busy week in Austin. We got some county judges. We're here in Shackelford County, so we got the county judge here. Marie Smith, where are you? In the shade. She's smart. County Judge Lee Hamilton from Taylor County in Abilene. Is he able to make it? He's going to be here. Okay. Charles Bro Seltzer, who is the county judge from Midland County, City of Midland. We got a bunch of Midlanders. Where's Bro? Thank you for being here. Thanks for helping out today. Fred Berry, are you here?
I'm working the camera.
He's working the camera. He's a judge, Court of Appeals, San Antonio, Texas.
And Hank Pop's roommate in law school.
That's your problem. Judge Barry, thanks for being here. Let's see, where are we on the agenda? I think that's got it for me, Hank.
Okay. The purpose of our being here today is, of course, to dedicate a historical marker. We could not have done that without Joanne Farmer and the Shackleton County Historical Society and Steve Waller. We could not have done that also without Cynthia Beeman of the Texas State Historical Society. All of those people played instrumental parts. Joanne Farmer actually wrote the application and did all the research associated with it. And we have a special memento for Joanne, and she's here somewhere. Where is she? All right, very good. All right. Let's give Joanne a big hand. She was a tremendous help. Middle of it. Hundreds and millions of years ago, the Indians crossed here on the buffalo trails, followed the buffaloes. There are prehistoric Indian sites all over this part of the country, and there's one 2 miles south of here that we found recently. Followed by that in more modern times, in 1858, the Butterfield Overland Stage crossed at this very point. One of the extra special occasions that we're going to honor here today is a rededication of the granite marker that marked the location here that was placed here on its 100th anniversary in 1958, and we relocated this over next to the Bud Matthews, Texas sign, and we'll talk about this in just a few minutes. After that, the cattle trails began here and moved their way north, and when the railroads arrived, this became a railroads crossroad too, and of course that's the primary reason that we are here today. And after the railroads dried up and blew away to some extent because of the automotive transportation that we have, the highways that were built, and believe it or not, this highway right here is an incredibly famous highway. This is Highway 6. Now a lot of people don't realize the impact of Highway 6, but if you're fighting Texas Aggie, you do. Highway 6 starts up here at Aspermont, goes all the way down to Galveston. And at Texas A&M we had the expression, Highway 6 runs both ways. Means that if you don't like A&M, you could get on it and get out. So, folks, if it's too hot for you today, I guess you can do the same thing. But my mother wrote a book that's been recently published in the Albany News, much to my chagrin. But in any event, it's an interesting series of thoughts and collections. And in that, she refers to those that are not of the land here as urban friends, and she refers to our family as pioneer stock, which I'm not sure I know exactly what that means, but one of the things I want to do today is honor each and every one of you, because today y'all are all honorary pioneer stock. So congratulations. In 1900, the Texas Central Railway extended a line northwest from Albany across this portion of Rose Ella Matthews Conrad's cattle ranch. Ella and her brother John A. Bud Matthews, for whom this site is named, properly constructed cattle pens and a loading chute at this location. Surrounding ranchers soon were shipping their cattle from this switch to markets in Fort Worth. And financial difficulties stalled its westward expansion for over 19 years after that. The Texas Central was charted as a different rail line in 1892, and the expansion westward began in the year 1900. In the year 1888, F.E. Conrad, who had married Rose Ella Matthews in 1881, the same year the railroad came to Albany, and who was a successful local merchant, bought the Chimney Creek Ranch. I suspect he probably bought it for less than it cost to ride the Butterfield stage to San Francisco. It was, of course, named the Chimney Creek Ranch for the creek and the chimney where the Smith Station is, some 2 miles south of where we are right now. The Butterfield stage, of course, went through there from 1858 to 1861. In 1892, F.E. Conrad died an untimely death, leaving Rose Ella Matthews Conrad with 5 children and this ranch to run. Her brother, John Alexander Bud Matthews, who has been pointed out earlier as the father of these 2 wonderful people here, came forward to help his sister out. In 1900, the railroad was extended west from Albany to Stanford, and cattle pens and a loading chute were built at this site. But what the heck is a switch? Who the heck knows what a switch is? Switch is not what my mother used to whip me with until I got big enough to take one of those things away from her. But it's like a spur, or it's an annex to the main railroad line, and that's where they switched cars around and filled them up with the cattle chute. The original cattle chute came right out of this spot right here where these metal pipes go directly to the south. John Matthews supervised the construction of these pens, and Mrs. Conrad wanted to call the switch Matthews, Texas, but there was already a railroad stop in Texas by that name. So she renamed it Bud Matthews, Texas, in honor of her brother. In 1920, the Chimney Creek Ranch was sold from the Conrads to my great-grandfather, G.R. Davis. G.R. had been a pharmacist in Breckenridge but wanted to be a rancher, and this was his start. His family had come to Breckenridge from East Texas by covered wagon, and I guess that's where Mother gets this pioneer stock stuff. Anyway, G.R. Davis had 3 children, one of whom was my grandmother, Robbie Davis Johnson. In 1921, my grandmother and grandfather were married at the ranch headquarters just south of here, and subsequently they had this one wonderful child over here, this woman of many names, also known as Chan. I think that was about 30 or 40 years after they were married. Isn't that correct when that was? Okay. Anyway, in 1933, and during this period, the Texas Central Railroad was sold to the Missouri, Kansas, and Texas Railroad, also called the MKT or the Katy Railroad. They were now operating this switch, and annually as many as 100,000 head of cattle were shipped from the surrounding ranches from this point to Waco and beyond to Fort Worth to the packing plants. And during this time also the pens were expanded and rebuilt. In 1956, G.R. Davis died and left the ranch to his daughter, Robbie Davis Johnson, who subsequently died in 1973. She left this ranch in trust for her daughter, Mary Frances, for her life, and then in turn to her 3 children someday. At this time, I'd like to acknowledge the fact that this property is in trust with the Overton Bank and Trust of Fort Worth, Texas, and 3 of their representatives are here today. Jane Lipe, I think she's the president of the bank. Is that right, Jane? She's the executive vice president in charge of the trust department. And Sue Turnage and Bob Walsh. All 3 of those people are here, and I'd like to give them a warm round of applause at this time. To the Waller Cattle Company, Charlie Waller, his son Robert, and Robert's son Bobby. And they have, these 3 generations have operated this ranch since that time. I know Robert's back here somewhere. And is Bobby here? All right, good. Bobby's right over here. In 1967, the switch itself ceased operations. The last train came through this point, and the tracks were picked up. Now, what the heck's happened since? Well, about 2 years ago, Joanne Farmer started helping us with the historical marker application. And one winter, I was out here poking around. I was just kind of, first of all, our darn pens were about to fall down. And I was poking around out here, and I started walking out here to the west. And I found the railroad ties and some of the railroad spikes of the original train crossing. They're still there. If you want to go look at them, just beware of the rattlesnakes. And but anyway, they're about maybe 50 feet beyond the end of the cattle car. And I didn't know what to do with them. I just kept thinking and struggling and trying to figure out a way. And a year ago, last May, I was on a trip with a friend of mine, the diminutive dynamo of Magnolia Avenue, Fort Worth, Texas, David Motherall, who's right here today. And David said, well, Hank, you need a cattle car. And by golly, that's what we did. And Ted's going to tell you how we did it. Here, folks, I know it's hot. But before we get away, I want to thank a whole lot of people here, because we do have a lot of people to thank on this project. It started about a year ago after David made the suggestion. James Holiday, my brother, and I got on the phone one day and said, how the heck are we going to do this? Because there are just not many cattle cars left in the United States. James had a friend named Garnell Baker of Cleveland, Texas, retired railroad man. He was taking a trip up to Colorado, and this big old field about 15 miles east of Amarillo, he found one. That's it. It didn't look like that. Didn't have any wheels on it. About a third of it was burned up. It's sitting in a muddy field. So we contacted the owner, Mr. Bill Ennis of Amarillo, made a deal with him. Now, there are 2 others that came out of this set. And thanks to Dr. Alvin Davis of the Ranching Heritage Association in Lubbock, he's got 2 of them, we got 1 of them. It was built in 1928 in Pennsylvania. There were only a few of them made. And it was, as you will see, if you want a little more history on it, I'll be glad to tell you afterwards.
One of the other reasons we did this was the Abilene Preservation League. Is Ruby Perez and Mike here? They're in here somewhere. Abilene Preservation League a couple of years ago came up with the Railroad Festival. And we wanted to do something to kind of commemorate railroads in this part of the country as well. And we appreciate what they've done. We then contacted Union Pacific Railroad. And folks, you see these tracks right here? They're from 1888. Original tracks came across West Texas. We really do appreciate Union Pacific and what they did. They were actually came from near Merkel, and we brought those in. The gravel, the City of Abilene Water Department, Dwayne Hargersheimer, donated the gravel for us. James West of Winters, his sons Jay and Jim, are they here? Mr. West of Winters actually constructed this. He knows a little bit about railroads and built it for us. Gerald Bigham Movers of Snyder moved it from Amarillo. I don't know how the heck he did it, but he got this thing down here. The wheels from National Rail Car near Roscoe. The renovation work, and here's one where we need to give a round of applause, because this thing, let me tell you folks, did not look like this when it arrived, but Mr. Edward Spurgeon of Albany did one fine job renovating this.